Well, good evening. It's Jeffrey Shaw speaking to you from Radio FM 88 Australia. We're from the Springwood Studios in Brisbane, Australia, and this is our show for 2023, the commencement. And my co-host, as you can probably see, is at the bottom of this little tree there, Andrena Forrest. Now, Andrena normally comes in and interacts with us. It's just so happened that they've had some big storms through the UK, and it's wiped out their mobile phone coverage, so or Wi-Fi, I should say. So she's been using her mobile phone in order to get a hotspot. Now, her video side of things is frozen, but they've been getting an audio. So, are you listening to us, Andrena, at this moment in time?
I'm certainly listening, but I can't see that I'm frozen. Everything looks hunky-dory here.
Okay, well, that's what we want. So we all know what you look like. You're looking very good today.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Hello, Vicky. Hi, everybody, and welcome. Today's the 12th of January, 2023. And I'd like to wish everybody, all of our listeners, old and new, a happy new year. I had a few challenges before Christmas where Instagram and Facebook disabled myself. I have no idea why, because I've been pretty good lately. So without further ado, I'm back on new friends, new contacts, and a new way forward for the new year. So today it's my great pleasure to start the new year off with Carol Poole. Now, if any of you don't know who Carol Poole is, let me enlighten you. She's the other half of the double act. She's my sister. And I will set the record straight before we start. She is my younger sister.
By 50 years.
Yeah. So Jeff's got double trouble this morning. Obviously knows Carol well. So without further ado, welcome, Carol. And it's lovely to have you on the show.
Thank you, honey. And it's been an absolute pleasure. I've watched your show since you started with doing this with Jeff, and I'm absolutely delighted with the speakers you've had. And I'm really delighted that you've invited me. So thank you.
Now just behave yourself or you'll be lobbed off.
Well, it's funny you should say that, because I happened to find this the other day. You haven't seen this, Jeff. But this is a picture of me and Andrena when we were small. And you can see, I am the little one, and you can see from the angelic look on my face that she was always the naughty one, although I always got the blame. Hang on. So there you go. So anyway.
So you can see I am the elder.
But,
only on paper.
Well, right. We just look for our shoe size these days, Dreen, and have an awful lot more fun.
We do. Okay, so where would you like to start? Obviously, I know your journey because I've been alongside you most of the way.
Yes, pushing me forward and saying, no, do that, and sort yourself out. But we got a lot of things that we could talk about. So I've earmarked a few that my passions, I suppose. One of my missions in life, I think, has always been supporting people who've gone through grief and loss and bereavement. And I have a different perspective on that to most people. So I'd like to talk a little bit about that and how I got into that later. But my other passion, apart from writing poems, is puppetry, as you know. And I have quite a collection, most of which are in storage. But I go around shops and so on. And sometimes these poor discarded toys just kind of call me and they say, if I had strings, I could move. So I've got a few here to show you and to show people how they can actually, with some simple additions, bring life to some of the toys. So that's, one of my passions, and making things which, I sent Jeffrey some pictures of a couple of characters that I'd made out of bottles like that. And I don't know if he's got the picture, but there was an orange and a little black puppet, and I called them Dancelot and Lancelot. And those are a few. Now, that one was made of 2 noodle dusters, a peg, like that there for the beak, and just a few bits to make feet, and it's just so simple. And you can do things, for example, with oven gloves, and put a couple of eyes on and so on. And even if you want to get a little bit more carried away, as I do, I mean, my daughters hate going shopping with me because it's like I don't look for what's the contents of stuff. I'm sort of looking at that and thinking, oh my goodness, there's a puppet. So, you could do wonderful things like that in next to no time with next to no money. So, yes, I'm a bit of a nightmare when I go shopping. I like to think that Michelangelo once saw his David in a block of stone and released him. So I like to think that I go around seeing puppets in containers and set them free.
Very good.
Hence your friends on the sofa.
Yeah, this is right. I mean, I found this gorgeous elephant the other day, and I saw him before Christmas in a charity shop, and he looked so unloved. Now, I haven't yet put any strings to him, but I did actually put one on his trunk to see if it would work. So, he's going to be able to, because everything's backwards on this, there. So just simply by pulling a string, I should be able to have him do and say things. And, so I thought he'd go really well to something like Nellie the elephant. So, that takes us back to our youth, doesn't it, Dream?
It certainly does.
And this character, he actually is a puppet, but there wasn't a lot of room working him from the underneath. And so I made a little gap at the back of the head so I could put my hand through there and actually open his mouth and have him misbehave as he does. He wanted a set of teeth. He wasn't very happy about not having any teeth. So I found that. So, but the kids love it, and so do the oldies. Us seniors. So I'll put him down. Yeah, this one needed a name, and I found a little drum somewhere. Which there it is. There we go. And I thought, he wanted to be Ringo. But the name, I did tell him that the name had already gone. So he's gone for Rango because he's an orangutango.
Okay.
You can sit with him and have him do all sorts of things like that. And he does talk, but only when I'm listening. Jeffrey, I can see your face. You think I've lost the plot, don't you?
No, I'm just thinking of all those English comedians, of the past. One-liners, Harry Worth,
But I tell you, I mean, you can go online and you can look at loads of things about how to make puppets. And there is a way of using a scarf, which is so similar. It's just like a square. And you just put a couple of beads or something, elastic bands, and a couple of weights on the top corners and the bottom corners. You stick a head in the middle, and then you can do all sorts of things like add, for example, this is a cat toy I found. So I put this on this character, and they are simple to make, and they are so simple to operate. Now, I don't know if you can see this, but we've now got a head I bought, a piece of fabric, and you just literally operate it like that. So all I have to do is I've got a loop around my arm there, which is on like an elastic, bead elastic. And then one piece of, this is actually fishing line, but you can use dental floss. It's really good. And you can just tie one piece to one side, one to the other, and you can actually just make it do that. And I haven't got the space here to demonstrate fully what you can do, but you get the idea. And you can have a real amount of fun. And if you haven't got any heads that you've bought, you could blow up a balloon, and you could just tie a balloon underneath a piece of fabric and do the same sort of thing. So, your only limit is imagination. And
you certainly got one of those.
I know it's always been a bit overactive. I think I must have had, what was it? They call it early onset attention deficit disorder. But I like to think it's genius potential, and I
Definitely
go everywhere. I mean, if kids have got these sort of toys, it looks huge from here because I'm holding it up by the camera, but they get discarded after a while because they don't do anything. So this one, I've not finished it yet, but I've added to this one strings and wings so that they'll lift up. Hang on. There. And you'll be able to have it flying and so on. So it's actually an active toy. So anyway, as I said, I am enjoying my second childhood. But I came across some of these characters called stretchkins when a friend took me to a boot sale. I'd never seen them, and I've got them here. I don't know if I can turn that round to, no, wrong way. Is it? I'm losing my direction here. The other way, right, okay. There you go. I've strung a few of them up on a pole over a chair. Now, I've never seen these things before. And apparently kids can stand with them and put their hands and their feet through the elastic, and they stretch and they do exercises. But I think, after a while, you might just get a bit fed up with that. So I added some strings. I'll show you this one because this one's my absolute favorite. There. And, I've even done strings so that you can lift his ears up as well. So, but it's so simple, and you don't even need a proper control. You can use it with just putting your hand through a loop and having it dance and so on. And I'll tell you, he's a lovely little mover. And then, you always have fun when I come down, don't you, Dreen? I should be down later. But we're still at the moment in the year of the tiger. Now, there's going to be a few of these that are discarded, and he looks so sad in the shop. I thought I had to take him back. So all I've done, I've put elastic bands around his ears and attached it to one in the middle. So I've now just put my hand through there until the elastic snaps. But anyway, I've tied dental floss to his feet and dental floss to each hand. And so, when he's on the floor, he's, again, do you see what I mean? It's so simple, and you can have so much fun with these. I don't know if I could show you how he walks, but, so that's kind of like a little sample of things that you can do and make very, very easily with some stuff that you've got around the house. And there's another character that I made on the same scarf principle. And I just added some feet and a scarf. And those are party hands. So again, you've got the same principle where you can just have them move and dance and so on. So anyway, I better pause for breath.
So where do you go and exhibit them and perform?
I used to take some of my puppets to care homes and other places and entertain the elders. And I used to find that they didn't actually want to watch a show. They preferred to get their hands on the puppets, especially the Pelhams. And I've got one of my favorite Pelham puppets is this one. And for many of the older people, they would remember these characters from when they were kids, and they wanted to actually get their hands on and make them perform and walk and so on. And I remember one lady in a care home was absolutely enthralled with one of the puppets, and she spent the whole time walking it around, talking to it and having a wonderful time. And when I was finished and I was packing up, the staff said, Carol, she's been in here for 2 years. She doesn't talk to anybody. She doesn't get out of her chair. We have never seen her so animated. And it was fantastic. It was just so much fun. But what I'd like to do, because I am aware with the current situation in the last couple of years that visits from entertainers and so on have been restricted, I would love to be able to put puppet kits together that care homes and other places can make use of to do some their own in-house entertaining.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that's something that might be a possibility at some stage.
I think when we were young, we used to work with potatoes.
Yeah.
Potato heads, and put little buttons in them and nose and ears and stuff.
I remember, with potatoes, we used to cut designs out of them and then stick some ink paint on, and we'd do, dabbing around, and that's usually what got me into trouble. I remember writing once when I was about a toddler on the hall wall, and I got such trouble for that. And I think I probably realized the power of the written word back then.
True. So, of course, paper mache. So it was always flour and water to make your glue, and
and that's great because you could blow up a balloon, because balloons obviously don't last that long, and they've got no weight to them if you wanted to use that for any puppet bits. But you could actually blow up a balloon to a small head size, cover it with papier mache and glue and so on, and then you can add the nose and the other features, and then you can pop the balloon out, and you've got something that then you can use to make heads. And I mean, there's got to be loads of tutorials and things like that online for people to make their own fun items.
But you've started your own, haven't you?
Pardon?
You've got a YouTube channel with a couple puppets on.
Oh yeah, I did. I thought it's time I actually put some information out there, and just show people what they can do with some imagination. So I think Jeff's got the links to those. But so that's what I do for the fun stuff.
And like you say, the old people love it because it takes them back to their childhood, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it's good fun. And I mean, it's too much of people just sitting around and waiting for other people to come and do something for them, rather than being enabled to be active and do something for themselves. And we are, I mean, one of the things that I've always been passionate about is capturing people's stories before it's too late. Now, as Andrena knows, and I think Jeff knows, but most other people might be listening to this don't. There's many years ago, and I still get called on now occasionally. I started creating celebrations of life to commemorate somebody's life for a funeral service, and I've been doing that for many decades. I think when I started that work, the only options were the church minister on the one side and the Humanist Association on the other. Now, the church ministers often didn't have enough time to do a fully personal service, so they would do the standard prayers, hymns, Bible readings, and a little bit about the individual. And on the other hand, you had the Humanist Association, which did a very personal, life-centered service, but did not allow for any spirituality or any religious music, or any prayers or something. So if somebody said, well, my dad always used to love him at school, can we have that? The answer was generally no, because it didn't fit their format. And I found that there was nobody doing anything in the middle. And so
Can I stop you there?
Yeah.
Can you say how you started, what got you onto this road of working with people with grief and bereavement and all sorts of things? You want to share your journey? I mean, obviously,
well, it wasn't something that I felt I was born to do, but sometimes life takes you in a direction that you kind of don't expect, and then you find that you've got a talent for something. Now, I'd always been interested in what happened when people die, and I remember I was always talking to people. If they'd lost somebody, I seemed to have a knack of listening. But the real catalyst for me was when I was expecting my first baby, and he was due in the end of the February, but I knew intuitively that he would be born before Christmas, and I knew he would be born on a Saturday. What I didn't know on a conscious level at the time was that he wouldn't survive. And he was born about 3 months early. And I was told by the hospital, well, the hospital staff came in on the evening after he was born at 5 o'clock on the Saturday. And nobody told me until the day after that he died. And I can still feel the grief that comes up now. And I remember a nurse popped her head around the door and she said, what was I going to call him? And I said, Michael. And that was it. And then the next morning, I'm looking at the clock thinking that he survived for 12 hours. He stood a good chance of making it. And then I get to know that he died the night before. So I never got to see him, or I never get to hold him. And I was absolutely beside myself with grief. And the hospital took care of all the funeral arrangements, but they never told me anything about it. And in those days, we kind of had this sort of like, we were separated from things like that. There was no support. There was no counselling. There was no involvement. And we tended to look upon the medics of the day as gods in a way, and whatever they said was to be. And I mean, it was actually years and years later that I discovered, that his death had almost been certainly triggered or caused by anti-vomiting pills that I'd been put on. But that's another story. But it took me 9 years to find out where my son's body was buried. But going back to after his birth, I mean, and his death, people didn't know what to say to me, and they avoided me as if I had some terrible disease. I mean, you'd have vegetarians going into the butchers, you'd have people crossing the street, anything to not talk about it because they were embarrassed, because they didn't know what to say. And my way of helping to heal myself was actually helping heal others. And for some reason, people used to single me out as somebody that they could come and talk to. And I would listen, and sometimes I would be able to reframe their experience. Sometimes they might be feeling unbelievably bad or guilty that they hadn't been there at the end when they'd said they would be. And they would carry that grief and that torment and that guilt. And I would sort of say, well, maybe you were guarding the door. They couldn't go until you'd stepped outside. And sometimes just by listening and feeding back people's thoughts to themselves, they would hear it in a different way. And this went on for quite some time. And then I realized that I was constantly hearing the same sort of story, that perhaps the minister who'd officiated the funeral had got the name wrong. It was a conveyor belt affair. It could have been anybody. It didn't acknowledge them and what they made of their lives. And I thought, well, instead of helping the people pick up so many pieces after they were dealing with grief, if we could start stopping so many pieces being broken in the first place and actually help to bring peace to the experience and bring love and even humor and laughter, it would help in the healing process. So that's what I did. And it's been emulated many, many times since. And as you know, I did that for a number of years. And the result was always something personal and meaningful. And people used to go out and they say, oh, that's the best funeral I've ever been to. Can I book you for mine? And, so we'd have a little laugh and a joke about it and so on. But then people started more and more saying to me, well, why can't you make all the arrangements? I would rather you did it and so on. And so that was when I thought, there is a real great need for this. And then, as you know, that's when I spoke to you from heart to heart and said, look, I think there's a need. Come and work with me. I'll do the ceremony work and so on. And this is how we started together working. And you would do, as you know, all the behind the scenes work. You would order the bamboo coffins, make the necessary arrangements. And as a team, people used to say, you're not the men in black, you're the ladies in color. And it was phenomenal, and it was so lovely. And they'd say, you're the glue that's held us together. And it evolved into us supporting people who were dying. And we opened this lovely little shop in Bristol. And we had so many people that would just come in and have a chat and make a cup of tea and sit there and so on. And it was really, really lovely. And that, I'd like to share something actually. Now, we also, as we evolved that, and it was, believe me, Jeff, it was unbelievably hard work. We were pioneering a whole new way of doing things. And we had funeral directors trying to put us out of business. We had windows smashed in our shop twice. I'm not saying it was funeral directors. It could have been anything and whatever else. But we had some major challenges. But what we did every Monday night, without fail, we had a healing group there. And people would just, they'd be queuing up outside, wouldn't they, Dreen? Waiting for us to open. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
No, yeah, I think she's frozen off again. But, it made such a difference. Are you back, sweetheart?
Yep.
Yeah. And anyway, some of our healers that used to come every week, and I don't know, you might know them as well, Jeff, from the Healing Weekend events, is Helen and Keith Bevan. Now, I've known them for many, many years. And Keith these days has some problems with dementia, so he's being looked after in a care home. And he has been for the last few years. But out of the blue, Helen's son, Beric, died about 2 years ago, just coming up to, about 2 years ago. And it was a complete shock because he was in his 40s. He was a bus driver for First Bus in Bath. There was no reason whatsoever for his death. There was a post-mortem and he baffled the coroner. Anyway, when we heard about this and we made contact with Helen, and she said, Carol, I want you to do the funeral. And so, and this is some guidance for anybody who has to organize a funeral at a ceremony. I met with them and, I met with Helen, and she told me the story, which is always important that one is listened to. But she said that Beric was going to be buried and they were having a cardboard coffin decorated with Volkswagen scenes because he was a VW enthusiast. And then, so I'm sort of, as I'm taking notes and asking questions, I'm thinking, how can we create this as a beautiful ceremony that celebrates his life? And then she showed me a photograph that they were going to put on an order of service. And I've got his order of service here. And she said he was a great Star Trek fan. And she said,
looks like I've dropped right out and I'm not hearing anything.
We can hear you. Oh, there she is.
Gone again. Love her. Signal problems. Yeah. So Helen showed me this beautiful image of Beric having gone to a Star Trek convention, and he was photographed with Leonard Nimoy. And so when we're talking about his passion for Star Trek, and she said that he was going to be buried in his Star Trek convention outfit. And I'm going to show you the order of service that the family designed. And again, this is something that people can actually do for themselves. You don't have to have the formal ones that the funeral directors tend to do, which, they have improved in later years, I must admit. But when you're actually actively involved in participating in the arrangements, it helps in the grieving process. Anyway, this is a photo of Beric with Leonard Nimoy, and and it's a beautiful image. So as I'm talking with Helen, I'm already starting to think of some of the phrases that would fit with the funeral and how we could theme it so that it actually acknowledged what he loved. And I have a copy here of, I started off with after doing the introductions, I started with a poem that I'd written. And I'm just going to read this to you because it kind of like sums up how we co-created something extraordinary. I'm just looking for my water. Oh, there it is. Right. Right. So, and we had some of the theme tunes to Star Trek in the background. So I started off with this, and it's called Beam Them Up, Scotty. If I was to speak of a Stephen, a Richard or Tom, or maybe a James, a Michael, or even a John, you might say, ah, but which one? I know 6 or 7. But if I said Beric, you'd say, ah, Beric Bevan. He was one of a kind, even down to his name, and there will never, ever be another the same. A VW enthusiast and a kind, caring man, a lover of science and a great Star Trek fan. Beric passed suddenly. Why? We don't know. Perhaps Spock appeared and said, it's now time to go. Our starship needs help as it crosses your heaven. And the help that we need is yours, Beric Bevan. Beam them up now, Scotty, Captain Kirk might have said. And to the next frontier, dear Beric was led. Led? He'd have been in front, not trailing behind, eager to see what things he might find. No time for farewells, a hug or a kiss, for this was a chance he just couldn't miss. For Spock was his hero amongst all the crew. Now imagine them on board, waving at you, all ready and waiting to move off at speed, to go help a planet that may be in need. Captain's log, stardate, Earth, August 18. Beric is welcomed as one of the team. Warp speed, please, Mr. Sulu, the captain might say. And before Beric knew it, he was well on his way. Off on an adventure to who knows where, and which for the moment you cannot share. Just for the moment, he is just out of sight, but you will meet again when the time is just right. So just for the moment, hold that love in your heart, for love never dies, even when you're apart.
Beautiful. Now you have a beautiful way, and I've been privileged to work with you doing Jeffrey.
And you know, at the end and so on. And you know, we lowered the coffin to the theme from Voyager, and it was emotional, but it was uplifting. You know, it was a really, really lovely occasion, as lovely as a celebration of life can be when the guest of honor is not present. And you know, that brings me back to what I was saying just now about the importance of people capturing people's stories and the wisdom and the knowledge, but preferably for them to actually share it before it's too late and somebody else has to write it on their behalf secondhand. Anyway, back to you, Dreeny love.
Oh yeah, no, I was going to say that was a huge, what was it, about 2000 when we started off the funeral, you know, when I came.
Yeah, we sort of developed from what I was doing and then into
it was
more,
very alternative. We had crystals in the window, we had angels, somebody used to do some stained glass angels, and I even used to sell vitamins and minerals. But it was all about helping people. Yeah. So, but I mean, we touched hundreds of people's lives in, you know, in the spell. And oh my God, you know, we've cried so many tears with families and
held them. Yeah,
and you know, sat with the dying, and that, what a privilege that is, to sit with somebody that's about to pass. You know, it's just and what we used to play was music, beautiful nature sounds in the background, or we'd have some essential oil so there was a beautiful smell. Instead of like some of these, you know, I've gone into places, hospitals and some hospices. Oh my God.
Well, you've got to hold your nose, haven't you, because of the chemical smell.
It's horrendous. And yeah, I had the privilege of working in a hospice on Southport, Paradise Kids. And I tell you what, that was the most beautiful hospice I could have ever gone in. The treatment, the love, the staff, the surroundings, the gardens. Honestly, you know, if there was anywhere I'm going to die, Southport would be the one. But
is that Southport in Queensland or Southport up in Manchester?
Yeah, no, down in Queensland.
Okay.
So yeah, a beautiful place, and they got a cafe and a gift shop in there, and they used to have meetings every Friday because I did a talk on voice and sound. They had different speakers for the staff. They got a lovely network of support. And yet we went to see a friend who was near the end of life, well, a few months ago now. And oh my God, it was so clinical. It was all white. There was lovely pictures. Honestly, the whole industry needs a blimmin' good wake up and a kick up the butt to bring back it more loving and caring for people at the last stages of life. Anyway, yeah, so that was you know, we used to have a, like you say, the meditate. We had we used to have a medium night as well. We'd have I think once a month we'd have a medium, and we'd have 25 people crammed in on chairs, £3 a ticket. But it was always full, and people were booked for the next one because we couldn't get anybody. And yet we had great big windows. We were on the corner in fish ponds, and all the windows from it was all steamed up. Don't know what the neighbours used to think used to go on in there, I tell you.
But I mean, you know, we got really, really well known for our holistic approach, which thank goodness is much more available to people now. And it's interesting seeing the advertisements and so on television these days. It's, apart from all these different cremation adverts and whatever else, it's about celebrating people's lives, you know. Well, I mean, I've been doing that for 40 odd years. So what you and I started as well, and what I originated because of my son's death, is actually inspired more people around the world than we could possibly ever imagine. And one lady that I worked with probably about, oh gosh, well, I don't know, at least 11, 12 years ago, she said to me, I mean, when I went to talk with her and look, you know, how can we assist with this and so on, and she was not the typical grieving widow. Her husband had died, and she was actually upbeat. She was positive. And as we were talking, she said to me, Carol, I cannot be sad for him. She said, he came to me in my dreams and he was so well and he was so happy. I wouldn't wish him back to the way he was. And it was a beautiful way that she put it. And as I'm going back, I'm thinking, how can I use what she said? And the words just, sometimes I feel really blessed. The words just literally come to me and I've got to catch them before they float off. And I wrote a poem. It was only three verses, quite a short one up to my usual standards. And she inspired me to write a poem, I'll See You in My Dreams, My Love. In fact, I've got now my lovely friend in Glastonbury, Tom Billing, who is one of the most gifted musicians around. He actually put music to it. And I do not have the sort of vocal capacity that would enhance it. Let's just put it that way. But I'm going to read you the words, and I could probably play you the music to it. And I thought what I ought to do, I've never been able to find anybody who would sing it. Maybe I need to do a Rex Harrison and just speak the words over the music. But we had to tweak the poem very slightly to fit the resonance of the music. But these are the words. I'll see you in my dreams, my love, and hold you in my heart. For when you have a love like ours, you can never be apart. Oh, you're always in my heart, my love. I think about the things you'd say. I long to hold you in my arms every single day. I'd like to be by your side, my love, with your hand held so tight, and whispering I love you in your ear and saying it will be all right. You're always in my heart, my love. I think about the things you'd say. I long to hold you in my arms every single day. But I know that I can't, my love, so memories will have to do. And I will cherish every night that I dream a dream of you and hope you dream about me too.
Very good. Hey,
So,
dreaming the new dream.
yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that Andrena and I started all those years ago, which we're reintroducing, was Bereavement Befrienders. And what we're looking at creating now is groups of self-help, well, a network of self-help groups of people helping people, because people don't always need counselling and whatever else when they're going through a crisis, but they do need someone that will listen and guide them through the maze and help clear the fog. And interestingly, when I was looking at something recently, thinking we could really do with a sort of a national day of mourning and acknowledgement for all the lives lost in the last 3 years, especially, before we can actually start to do the healing. And I came across something that links very much with Australia, and that is the Sorry Day that was started in 1998, I think, to acknowledge the loss of the stolen generation. And I thought, yeah, we need an acknowledgement of the loss of so many elders who had to die on their own, families that were fractured by grief and so on. And I'm looking at how we can co-create that, and then from that start to celebrate the lives of those who have moved on and bring the love and the healing back. So more about that another time. But that brings me on to a really interesting connection with Glastonbury, where I've lived on and off for many years, and so did Andrena. But there's a very strong connection with Australia and the Aboriginal people, particularly the stolen generation. So I'm going to have a glass of water and let somebody else say something for a minute. You still with us, Andrena?
Well, I don't know. The problem is, like, it keeps going off and then it comes back on again. So I don't know whether I'm talking to. I don't know whether I'm talking to myself, or what. So anyway, I'm back here, present and correct, I think.
Well,
but I apologise to everybody for the signal, because I've just spoken to Debs on the farm, and she said even her Wi-Fi is dropping in and out. So I would be no better in there to where I am now. So it's just how it is today.
wow.
But yeah, so yeah, so you've got a lovely story to share, which is to do with Ronnie Cox.
Yeah.
And when we went up to So do you want to share the story how it started? Because I know my signal's dropping in and out.
Yeah. All right. Well, before I do, I'll say a little bit about Glastonbury, because, you know, you and I have lived there on and off, and it's quite a magical place. And I've talked a bit about my puppets. I mean, I know Jeffrey's got a picture of my 2 dragons. Now, I've always been passionate about dragons. No, that's not a dragon. Keep going. Do you remember we headed off a procession dream with my 2 dragons, and they're about 10
God.
tail. Now, I didn't make them. They were made by Seamus Joy in Glastonbury, and he's incredible with his talent for making dragons. There they go. Look. I don't think you're in the background of that one, but they're called Magic and Sparkle. They're in a shop window in Trowbridge at the moment because I've got no space to put anything. But yeah, so they're absolutely awesome. And I wrote loads of stories. I mean, I'm not going to read you a whole load of this one, but this was Dragon Spirit Rising. When the dragons awake from the dream time and are seen on Glastonbury tour, the power will return to the people, and we will be mighty once more. If you hear the dragons calling, if you feel them in your heart, if you've a fire in your belly, it's time to make a start. And there's quite a bit more, so I'm not going to read all of that to you. But Seamus, who is the amazing, you're right, there's Ronnie. We'll come back to him in a minute. Don't leave that picture. Move that picture a minute, Jeff. But Seamus, who made the dragons. Oh yeah, now right, hang on, right, just flip back a second. Now, the bottle I showed you just now, that's 2 milk bottles and 2 detergent tops. And if you flip back the other way a minute and show the orange one and the black one, there. Now, they're actually made from 2, can you see that? Those bottles. I mean, I saw that shape and I thought, oh my God, there's a body. So I just cut it down and to something like that. So, I mean, you could even do something like that. No, anyway, I'm digressing again. So yeah, I had a beautiful image as well that I bought from Seamus's daughter Tara. She's an incredible artist, and with my Dragon Spirit Rising poem, I put her photo. I don't know if you can see that there in the middle. Hang on, let me take it out of the plastic because there's a reflection, but she's an incredible artist as well.
Say the artist was, Carol?
Tara, Seamus's daughter. There. And you can see a picture that Jeffrey showed just now, which was the dragon on the tour, which is that side. And that picture, I think, is the one that you took of the dragon rainbow. Do you remember that? The dragon cloud. But going back to Glastonbury, I mean, my Glastonbury poem now is quite famous. I used to perform it locally with John Dalton, who played the harp, and he would play the music to William Blake's Did Those Feet in Ancient Times, and I would recite the Glastonbury poem, which have I got a picture of that here? Yes, so there's I did that with loads of images around, which I hope we're going to get reproduced again. And anyway, so the Glastonbury poem. Glastonbury has a history of magic, myth, and mystery. But is it fact or is it fiction? Does its water cure affliction? Did Jesus come and sweetly smile on what was known as Avalon's Isle? Did his uncle plant the thorn which flowers every Christmas morn? Did an ancient ghostly hand map the ruins on Abbey land? Is King Arthur buried here with his Lady Guinevere? Is Excalibur, the famous sword, part of a buried treasure hoard? Was the Lady of the Lake a Glastonbury goddess, for goodness sake? Are the eggstones really portals that hide the fairies from us mortals? And have the fairies got a door to a realm beneath the tor? Have they got a palace there with a king and a golden chair? Are Gog and Magog wise old sages guarding the tor as oaks of ages? What stories could the yew trees tell in the garden at Chalice Well? Do the ley lines form a grid? And where's the abbey's treasures hid? And is there a dragon with a tail watching over the Holy Grail? There's many a legend and many a tale, and lots of lovely goods for sale. Crystals, wands, and so much more, and pictures of the mystical tour. So come to Glastonbury and stay a while. Feel the magic. It'll make you smile.
Very good. Oh,
Yeah.
right.
Very good.
Well, Glastonbury obviously attracts a lot of people from around the world. And one of the people that came over quite regularly was a lovely Aussie guy called Ronnie Cox, and I know you're both acquainted with him. And he and I used to go around the same open mic circuit. He would be taking his guitar and singing his songs, which are generally quite comical. And I would be going and doing some of my various poems. And we just became good friends and caught up. And Jeff had a picture of him just now, which was one of the last times that he was in Glastonbury. Anyway, he discovered that he had English ancestry, which meant that he could get an ancestral visa. That meant he didn't have to keep leaving every 3 months and then coming back. And so he went back home to Australia, and a couple of weeks afterwards, I actually came over on a visit, as you know. And while I was there, Ronnie phoned me and he said, I've got to go to Brisbane. He lived up the coast a little bit in somewhere not far from Nimbin. And he said, I've got to go to Brisbane to go to the consulate or whatever it was there. Can I come and catch up with you people? So we said, yeah, that would be great. So, he came and shared some time with us. And after he left, about a week later, we three went to, what was it? Was it Grid Point 44 or something? We were invited to indoor ranges, weren't
Adelaide.
we? Yeah. And,
Filipino pound, yeah.
Filipino pound.
That was it. And it was absolutely awesome. We were invited to join, it was a conference and a gathering of Indigenous elders of the Aboriginal people. And it was a fantastic event. And anyway, we met Carrie Ann Cox, who is known as Jinky, I think. And she's a well-known singer of the Aboriginal people. And her mum was there, and loads of other extraordinary individuals. Anyway, we struck up a bit of a friendship with them, and they said, come up and see us in Nimbin. And so a couple of weeks later, we headed up there for a weekend. And I felt very, very strongly that I needed to connect Ronnie with these people, but I didn't know why. And so I made contact with him, and we arranged to meet him on our way through. But for some reason, phone signals didn't work. We didn't connect. We carried on and visited our friends and came back. And it was just like, okay, it didn't happen. But the universe had other ideas. And he, he phoned me a couple of weeks later. I remember we'd gone up to Mount Tambourine. And all of a sudden, and it was a Sunday morning, he says, I've got to share this with you. He said, it's unbelievable. He said, I went to the market in a place called Yukai. And he said, and I sat down outside for some refreshments. And he sat at the same table as some people he didn't know. So they got talking. And they're talking about where they've travelled. So Ronnie then says, oh, I'm not long back from Glastonbury. Whereupon one of the ladies there says, oh, we've got some friends who come from Glastonbury. We know the sisters, Carol and Andrena. Well, Ronnie's jaw sort of like is practically on the floor. And he can't, he said, said, and it was like, well, I don't believe this. This is the same people. Of all the people and all the markets that he could have gone to and all the tables he could have sat at, he sits with these people. So he's talking with Lorna. So they've got the same surname. Now, okay, there's about 500,000 people around the world with the surname Cox. One of my daughters is married to a Cox. And they suddenly discover that they've got the same ancestor. His great, how many greats, I don't know, grandfather was William Cox, who developed the road through the Blue Mountains. He had relationships with one or possibly two Aboriginal ladies and spawned a whole generation of Coxes. So they were cousins. I mean, how bizarre.
And not apples.
Yeah, I mean, it's just extraordinary. So there I am sometime later in Glastonbury, sharing this story in Glastonbury Abbey, where I'm telling some people about the history of the town. And this chap says to me, he said, I heard a similar story like that on something called Who Do You Think You Were? I said, really? And he couldn't remember who it was. So I did some research, and it turned out to be Jason Donovan, who is also linked with the same line. But it gets even more than that, because one of the things that we learned a little bit about at the conference at Wilpena Pound and the Aboriginal history was about the stolen generation. Now, there's an incredible film called The Rabbit Proof Fence, which I think was written by somebody called Doris Pilkington or Pilkington, something like that. I forget the lady's name. Anyway, it's a story about how she, I believe it was her, walked 1,500 miles following the rabbit proof fence to get back home after she was taken away from her family. And the rabbit proof fence was set up to try and stop the rabbits going from one area of Australia to another. Now, where does that come into Glastonbury, you might think, apart from me learning about it from Ronnie? Well, going back to I think it was around about the 1800s, might have been slightly later or slightly earlier, but the Abbey, after the dissolution, which sounds like dissolving an aspirin, I don't like the word, but the massacre of the monks and the abbeys and things like that, it went into ruins and so on, and some of the stones were used to build a house called Abbey House, which is at the top of the Abbey grounds, and that was on sale in about 1907, and it was sold with an interesting ruin in the garden. And the interesting ruin was, of course, the remains of Glastonbury Abbey. Mm. But going back to previous owners, it was owned by the Austin family, who had huge contacts with Australia. And there's even a whalebone arch in Glastonbury Abbey that, well, there's only one half of it now. But anyway, the story is that they introduced rabbits from Glastonbury into Australia. So apparently they also brought back kangaroos, which didn't cause the same sort of damage that the rabbits did. But anyway, so that was the connection between the rabbit-proof fence and Glastonbury. And the fact that, you know, there are places now in Australia that are called Avalon and Glastonbury and so on. So it's really, really interesting when you start to follow the dots and the links where it takes you. It's extraordinary. And, you know, you only get to know these things by talking and listening. And I don't know, I've tried to send this link to Ronnie. I hope he gets it. But it was an incredible story, how sometimes the universe just nudges you and you find extraordinary information and magic. And magic happens. Yeah. So I'll pause for breath for a minute.
Right. Yeah, because like I mentioned earlier that I've been disabled.
No, your account has, dear. You've got to be so careful of the words you use. You create your reality.
Yes. Anyway, so I was knocked off my perch by Instagram and Facebook. So obviously I've lost a huge selection of friends that I've met on my travels, you know, with the ancestors and all sorts of things, which is not a problem. But I tried to find Ronnie to friend him, to send him your link. So I'll have to try and find it another way, because I couldn't get hold of him.
Yeah, I see Vicky's put out.
Story, but
yeah.
No, it's an amazing, and you know, I remember we were sat in Nimbin with all the girls, Lorna and Jinky, and you know, way back. That was, you know, it was an amazing story how that brought everybody together. Just incredible. So you just never know, do you?
You know, I've just made contact again with Lynn, who I think she's part of the Hands Around the World, and I've said about how can we co-create something that acknowledges the sorrows, and I don't want to use their I'm inspired by the Sorry Day, but I wouldn't want to refer to it as on without permission, and I want to make sure that the elders are honoured and so on. That's what we need. A culture of honouring our elders here is so important.
Yeah. Wow. Well, that's amazing. That's like an interesting story, and you know, and I know working with people that have lost someone or talking to people is so important. And I saw a few messages. Pauline has got something lined up that so maybe she might want to touch base as well. So you have started building up a network, haven't you, and round and about for bereavement befrienders, and so there's all little links happening, spreading out. So obviously, if anybody's interested or wants to know any more, and I saw somebody lost their brother recently, wanted the poem. So if anybody wants to touch base and let me know where we met, because obviously I got lots of interesting people. Obviously, I want it to be the real deal rather than Jocelyn. She loves your poem. So
I mean, I'm very blessed with the inspiration that sometimes comes to me. I don't know. I mean, some of the words move me to tears. You know, they're so powerful, and it's just like, wow. And I want to get them out there so they actually can go out and make a difference. So I could, like yourself, sweetheart, I could do with a PA to help me do all these things.
God, couldn't we just?
A dozen, you know, and then I could, you know, but yeah.
Right. Is there anything else you'd like to share? Right, Pauline and Jocelyn, you'd be more than welcome to use Carol's poems. And I know Carol doesn't mind sharing any of her poem.
No.
No, we're not, Pauline. We're Carol's currently in Lowbridge at the moment. So
yeah, I'm in Wiltshire, courtesy of the Cosmic Joker.
We missed you, Andrena. I think we didn't hear you say it's Paul Dorset, isn't it?
Yeah, Paul Dorset. Yeah. So,
I'm looking for a permanent place to put all my puppet collection so they can come out of storage and make people laugh. And just a base we can run all the other things that we want to get started, you know. So, and I'm sure it's going to happen because the need is now. And I mean, the work that we did, Dreen, is too valuable to not have it flourish. And, you know, maybe we were just planting seeds then and they're coming up now to spread out and plant more. I don't know. But I know the need is there.
Okay, so is there anything you'd like to finish? Any words of wisdom for anybody, or any other verses that you'd like to share?
Well, I think we ought to have something humorous.
Oh, God.
But before we do, just going back to capturing people's wisdom, I was at a conference about 3 or 4 years ago in Glastonbury, and one of the speakers was an author called Marion Green. I don't know if she's still around, but she used to write about women in the so-called witchcraft era who were persecuted for their knowledge of herbs and things like that. And she said something that had quite a profound impact on me. She said, when people were out in the fields plowing and so on, how did they know what time of day it was so they could get back to this, take the ox back to the barn or the horse back to the stable before dark? And, there's this sort of like slight stunned silence. And then she said, you would tell the time from the flowers. She said, the daisy will open its petals in the morning, and about an hour before it gets dark, we'll close them. So if you see the daisy's petals closing, you've only got an hour to get back. And I thought, my goodness, this is real knowledge, natural knowledge and wisdom that we are losing. We need to capture it. I would encourage everybody, while you can, to write down all these lovely little wisdoms that you heard from your family, your grandparents, and things like that. And let's not lose our social fabric of history, in relation, in return for some sanitized version of events and things that, So anyway, I'll get off my soapbox. I am going to share a poem with you, which is a true story. It's not the Women with Whiskers one, which is another time maybe. But I'm going to share this with you, and I think you might remember some of the actualities that prompted this. Going back a few years, my oldest daughter wanted to keep chickens. So this is based on a true story. Here we go. It's called City Chicks and the Hen House Blues. Shall we get some chickens? My daughter said to me. Then we can have free-range eggs for breakfast, lunch, or tea. The idea was very tempting. It might be a bit of fun. We sectioned off the garden so they could have a run. And they'd need a nice new hen house in which to sit and lay. Somewhere cosy to cuddle down at the end of every day. So we built them Cluckmore Cottage, a home for happy chicks, with ramps for ease of entry and rooms just like the Ritz. We brought home 6 baby hens and watched them start to preen. We gave them some old lady names, Doris, Betty, and Maureen. Phyllis, Gertrude, and Little Flo we named the other 3. We had to clip their feathers, though, because Flo flew up next door's tree. We gave them noodles and pasta, corn and grain to eat. And they loved to dig the garden because slugs and worms were a treat. We'd put down bowls of spaghetti, then stand and watch the fun. One would grab a beakful and dash off up the run. The others chased in hot pursuit, determined to get to the goal, blissfully ignorant of the fact there was plenty more food in the bowl. It was like watching a rugby scrum as they dived in for their dinner, squawking, squeaking, and squabbling until one came out the winner. The garden got rather trampled and it smelled a bit as well, but all was going to be worth it when we had some eggs to sell. Eagerly, we all waited for the first egg to emerge. We searched daily in the hen house and along the garden verge. The chicks grew into lovely hens, but there were still no eggs in sight. Then one morning, I heard a sound like crowing at first light. We had a masquerader, a transvestite hen to be sure, but which one of them was guilty and would be shown the door? We listened hard each morning and carefully watched each one, but they all seemed to start crowing, no doubt to join in the fun. The neighbours began complaining the morning noise was dire. One crowing cockerel was bad enough, but we seemed to have a choir. To cut a long story very short, Betty turned out to be Bertie. We had to rename another George when we found he wasn't Gertie. As for the rest, there was more to come, for little Flo was clearly Big Fred. Phyllis was physically Philip, and Doris became Boris instead. Sadly, our egg enterprise was over before it had even begun, because poor Maureen refused to oblige with so many cocks in the run. We found them all nice new homes, and the hen house was swapped for a shed. But now we have to get our eggs from the local farm instead. There you go.
Brilliant.
And what we did, we had 6 baby chicks. 5 of them were not going to be egg producers. They were male. So it was such fun seeing them run up and down the garden. It was lovely. So.
Yeah, and I know because like they had a lovely house, like Clutmore
It
Cottage.
was Clutmore Cottage, you know, it's beautifully made.
And what was I going to say? Yeah, like the noodles. I can remember like whether you or Nikki would make a big thing of noodles, and like you say, one would take a noodle and then they'd all run up and there'd be a blooming great bowl here, but they didn't have the sense. But it was hilarious.
It was so much fun, but there we go. Anyway, thank you so much for inviting me. It's been an absolute delight.
Yeah.
Very good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you for coming on the show, and it's been entertaining as ever. And obviously, I'm sharing your journey with you, and look forward to seeing you in a couple of hours.
We got to spread miles of smiles, haven't we? We really just got to go and do some fun stuff. So
yeah, definitely.
At the risk of embarrassing my children, you know. But there we go. So thank you, Jeffrey. Great host.
Thank you. Yeah.
And thanks everybody.
Very good. Okay.
Are we off?
No, it still says no. Oh, right.
No, there's people bloody coming in and saying hi, thank you, and all that stuff. So
that's lovely.
Well, read it out then, because obviously I don't, because I keep coming in and out. I don't know quite what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing. So,
that's nice from Vicky.
Hello, Andrew, Jocelyn, and yeah. So yeah, it's another lovely show. Good start to the year. So and we've got quite a few more lined up, and I've had some interesting people have approached me about coming on the show, so that's nice. I've got to follow up a few leads, so I've got to try and sort this Wi-Fi issue out. So
yeah,
never a dull moment. There you go. So life moves on.
All right. Love you both. Thank you very much for coming.
All right, Jeffrey. Thank you.
Bye.
See you, Carol. Bye.
Bye, lovely.